we are all very aware that our civilization, whatever exactly that is, it's a topic of debate, but our civilization is in a state of decline. And it's an Aryan idea that these things go in cycles. And you can find evidence of that in the eastern, especially in the eastern domain of what used to be part of our world. Now it's really something different entirely. But we've got two guys, I think, at least, that we could talk about. One is better known, I think. It's Oswald Spengler. He believed that civilizations are living things. They have a certain lifespan. They're born, they mature, and eventually they die. And there's not really a whole lot that you can do. Maybe one will live longer than another, but eventually they're going to die out, and their corpse is going to basically decompose into fertile ground for a new civilization to grow up. And the new civilization or civilizations is going to inherit traits and aspects of its parent, but it's going to change and it's going to recombine with the others. So you're going to get something that passes away and then something new comes along to replace it. And we could quickly describe with increasing velocity how the classical Greco-Roman civilization died out and was replaced by a Western Christian European civilization, which obviously inherited a lot from the classical world, but was a new civilization. And then starting, I think, around about, in the late medieval, early Renaissance period, you get something new coming along. The humanistic or modern civilization, which pretty much killed off and destroyed the Western European Christian civilization at the time of the French Revolution. And so now, here we are, living in sort of a twilight era, I would say, according to Yaki, who would be the successor to Spengler, in that the 20th century idea, the idea of fascism and National Socialism, was really sort of strangled in the crib when it should have replaced at this increasingly short time frame, right? The classical civilization might last from 3000 BC to 500 AD, and then the Western Christian civilization lasts for 1,000 years, and then the next one only lasted for 500, and then now we're in this even shorter time frame in which the replacement for that came up only 100 years after it had completely flowered and matured at the time of the French Revolution. So now we're living in this sort of bizarre state in which the civilization we occupy is absolutely tottering. It's about to fall over and crush itself, and yet it is somehow still strong enough to choke down whatever's trying to replace it. Spengler viewed this as inevitable. There was another man, Joseph Arthur de Gobineau, who was a Frenchman, and I guess you could say sort of a proto-Nordicist and a critic of Western culture and a reactionary. So Spengler was pessimistic, de Gobineau was pessimistic, and then you have all of our guys, I would say, like Nietzsche, who believe that we are going to push through as moderns. We're going to triumph. We're going to crush the weak, and we're going to substitute it with a new ideal of strength and power. We're going to get rid of liberalism and humanism, and we're going to recapture our lost virtues of strength and nobility and beauty. That's the good side of Nietzsche. There's some other sides to him as well that are more difficult to deal with, but that's the positive take on Nietzsche. So I would have to say that de Gobineau and Spengler were proven wrong by a certain controversial political regime in Germany in the early 20th century that completely stopped social decay, that increased birth rates, that restored sanity and rationality to that society until they were destroyed by an international coalition of the usual suspects, including Judeo-finance, Quaker fanaticism and what would you call it? All of the attendant, little, homunculi of these various groups. Okay, so in order for that regime to be able to prepare its people for a more or less bloodless social revolution in 1933, a whole bunch of really bad things had to happen. They had to lose the First World War. They had to live under the political incoherency and instability and chaos of that social democratic, liberal / conservative Weimar regime. So that center madness. They had to live through that. They had to watch 20,000 people a year kill themselves. I don't know how many people kill themselves each year in the United States, but birth rates were down. People killed themselves. People weren't getting married. They didn't have jobs. It was a catastrophe, just like it is now. They had to live through all that. They had to live through being invaded by France 3 times, I think, during the 1920s. They had to live through not having an army. They had to live through being, ruthlessly squeezed for their financial assets. All these problems. Okay, all those things prepared the way for a certain man and his people to push their ideas out to a public that needed a new ideal to save them from this madness. And that's what happened. Now, if that man had had those ideas and he had his group around him of maybe 300 or 400 people, would they have gotten anywhere in a prosperous, happy society, a materialistic, successful society? They wouldn't have gotten anywhere. And this is why suffering is not held to be bad in any traditional society. Suffering is something that makes you stronger and it prepares you for doing great things. Okay. We are suffering, and we're going to suffer a lot more before we're ready to do something important. And people right now today are suffering in Washington, D.C. People are bleeding. Some people may be dying. And even though most of them are just normal people, they're conservatives, they're libertarians, they probably don't have any ideas, they probably don't have any leadership, they're still suffering to prepare us for what comes next. Their blood that they will pour out on the ground will contribute towards our future. So I support them for that. I don't support them for that man that they're trying to use as a totem for their, more or less lack of ideas. That weak man who's unable to pull the trigger. All those people around him who are unable to pull the trigger. Total failure. Just a mockery. Nothing's going to happen. Nothing could have happened. But in a Hegelian sense, about Hegel's view of history is that everything to get us to this point that we're at right now had to have happened. We couldn't have gotten here without everything that happened. That man in Germany could not have come around and got the ideas that he had and come to power with the consent of his people in a bloodless social revolution without Lenin and Trotsky, people like Bela Kun, all those types. They had to do all that murder, they had to kill all those peasants, they had to rape all those women, they had to starve all those children, things we don't like, in order for the situation to be prepared in people's minds to accept the new ideas and the new man. So, just keep this in mind. This is a pep talk, but it's sort of it's a pessimistic pep talk of we don't know how long the road is and we don't know how bad it's going to be, but we know it's going to be long and bad. But there is hope because unexpected things do happen. I do not subscribe to the view of some conspiracy theorists that everything is planned, that nothing's real, that everything's fabricated. I don't believe that. I don't think you should believe that either. Gobineau is inferior to a man like Houston Stewart Chamberlain and his foundations of the 19th century, even though He takes a lot from him. He follows him. So we can take ideas from the reactionaries and the traditionalists, as long as we keep the idea in our mind of where we're headed and what we want. Okay. Thank you for your time. Don't get discouraged. Those people in Washington, the ones who aren't feds, you know, a lot of them are feds anyway, right? A lot of those people waving those Trump flags are mic'd up, cammed up. They're there. They're pushing this stuff. People in crazy costumes and things. But some of those people there who are going to bleed today are doing the work of Providence. They're preparing the way. They're showing our people that you can organize a mass movement and take over your own government structures. And we're also seeing, for the large part, that the police don't want to just shoot them. They don't want to just kill them. They know that they're their people too. You see the race of all the police officers and the protesters? It's not a coincidence. The other thing is that the argument that I don't like against accelerationism is that if these Democrats and these democratic socialists and these liberals and all these people get in power, then they're going to make it tougher on our guys, and they're going to pass a bunch of bad laws against nationalists and white nationalists, and they're going to come down on us like a ton of bricks. In fact, the case is that laws mean nothing, and the consent of the people means everything. So these people can pass all the laws they want, but the more unpopular they are, and the less legitimacy they have, the less these laws matter. Okay? So the more you erode the legitimacy of this ruinous government and the toadies of these oligarchs, the more you erode that legitimacy, the more laws they have to pass and the stupider they look, and the more they destroy their own selves. That's why accelerationism is important, because all of this is a battle for the minds and the wills of the people like those police officers and those bureaucrats and the shopkeepers, all the workers, the normal people who have to enforce all these rules on a daily basis. If they don't believe it, these people don't have power. What can they do? They can drone strike you. Few people. They can't do it to the mass. Thank you for your time.